The Chinese continue to create and invent self-deprecating aphorisms that bring joy to a life that is as painful as bitter liquor. For example, born from the indulgence of others, dying from the randomness of the life. This quote is like another Chinese maxim. Your life is a character in a tragedy. All people's births are not self-chosen. Either it was a pleasure for him and her, or a humiliation for her. The better ones are those whose parents were well prepared and planned your arrival. The worse ones, your birth was all random. No one asked you if you wanted to come into the human world, which means that you came into the world with absolutely no decision of your own. And then were taught that you had to find your purpose in life. Even worse, all your plans for yourself can be crushed by fate. You can neither decide your birth, nor your life, nor know when you will suddenly die. Please follow me and subscribe to my channel. I look forward to working with you to unravel the mysteries of destiny and our no-wills ideas and myths. The original sky god, Uranus, had the sole interest of infusing Gaia, the god of the earth, with his positive energy. As a result, Gaia became pregnant with the first generation, the 12 Titans. Presumably, Uranus' positive energy tube had held up for so long that Gaia couldn't get her children to be born, and also really tired of Uranus' endless punting inside her. She encouraged her children to castrate their father. The Titans feared their father, and only the youngest Titan, Cronus, dared to fight. Gaia made a sickle from a gray flint, or adamantine, within herself and gave it to Cronus. When Uranus's energy tube erupted once again, pumping full positive energy into the earth that was filled with negative energy, Cronus, who had ambushed his mother's vagina beforehand, cut off Uranus's genitals and threw them into the sea. The phallus of Uranus gave birth to Aphrodite, the goddess of sex. The blood from the wound of Uranus gave birth to the three vengeful goddesses Erinyes, the Gigantes, and the Melee. Hesiod in Work and Times wrote,
Zeus the father made a third generation of mortal men, a brazen race sprung from ash trees, Melee.
Uranus ran back into the sky, never to return to Earth, and the sky were separated from the Earth. And in Japanese mythology, because the moon god Tsukiyomi no Mikoto killed Yukamochi, the goddess who protects food, it led to the wrath of Amaterasu Omikami, who refused to meet with the moon god again. So the sun and the moon never met again. The tragedy of the gods is then eternally displayed in the sky. Cronus became the new king of the gods, and in order to consolidate his hegemony, he imprisoned his siblings in hell who could challenge him. Cronus married his elder sister, Rhea, the mother goddess, and gave birth to the gods of Olympus. Since he had taken the throne of the gods from his father, he was of course afraid of his children plotting against him. Gaia in particular, seeing that Cronos was as brutal as his father, cursed Cronos to be overthrown by his offspring. Thus, Cronos devoured the children born to Rhea. By the time Zeus was to be born, Rhea had already lost 3 daughters and 2 sons. She could no longer bear to lose this youngest child. Rhea approached her mother, Gaia, and her father, Uranus, for help. And following her parents' instructions, Rhea went to Lyctus on the island of Crete, where she gave birth to Zeus and handed Zeus over to Gaia. Rhea then handed a stone wrapped in swaddling clothes to Cronus, who promptly swallowed it. Gaia takes Zeus to a cave on Mount Aegon. Zeus was fed by 2 nymphs, Adrastea and Ida, with milk from the goat Amalthea. There, too, Zeus was protected by the Curetes, to prevent the cries of Zeus from reaching the heavens and being heard by Cronus. The Curetes shouted and danced outside the caves, and struck their shields with their spears to cover the baby's cries. The name Adrastea, which means inescapable in ancient Greek, is an accurate description of fate. Her father, Melesius, was the eldest of the 9 Curetes and their leader. His name means bee-man or honeyman in ancient Greek. Long before wine was made, the Greeks mastered the fermentation of honey. In Greek mythology, the gods used or drank a type of ambrosia, which means immortality in Greek, probably made of fermented honey. Daniel Staples, an American classical mythologist and religionist, argued that ambrosia was made by fermenting Amanita muscaria and nectar. Amanita muscaria, commonly known as a fly agaric or fly amanita, which can cause hallucinations. As discussed earlier in this book, the fruit of good and evil that Adam and Eve ate in the Garden of Eden was the Amanita muscaria. In ancient Greek, the she-goat Amalthea means tender goddess. Ida means wooded mountain. Thus, there may have been confusion over the course of the oral tradition of this story. Zeus was supposedly raised on Mount Ida, the highest mountain on Crete, which at an elevation of 2,456 meters or 8,058 feet. It is the highest mountain range in Greece. This is similar to the Japanese myth in which Amaterasu Omikami sends Takemikazuchi, an aim no Torifune, to go and conquer Japan, the latter of which is more likely to have been the name of the boat that Takemikazuchi traveled, as its Japanese name is deity Heavenly Bird Boat. The Italian medieval poets Dante Alighieri and Francesco Petrarca, along with Giovanni Boccaccio, are known as the three crowns of the Renaissance. Dante depicted this myth in his masterpiece, The Divine Comedy.
In midst of ocean, forthwith he began. A desolate country lies, which Crete is named, under whose monarch in old times the world lived pure and chaste. A mountain rises there, called Ida, joyous once with leaves and streams, deserted now like a forbidden thing. It was the spot which Rhea, Saturn's spouse, chose for the secret cradle of her son. And better to conceal him, drowned in shouts his infant cries. Within the mount, upright and ancient form there stands, and huge, that turns his shoulders towards Damietta and at Rome, as in his mirror looks. Of finest gold his head is shapt, pure silver are the breast and arms, thence to the middle is of brass, and downward all beneath well-tempered steel, save the right foot of potter's clay, on which, then on the other more erect he stands, each part except the gold is rent throughout, and from the fissure tears distill, which join penetrate to that cave. They in their course thus far precipitated down the rock form Acheron, and Styx, and Phlegethon. Then by this straitened channel passing hence beneath, e'en to the lowest depth of all, form there Cocytus, of whose lake thyself shall see it, I here give thee no account.
In Dante's depiction, the old man with a golden head and feet of clay actually represents mankind, because when a man is a teenager, he always has great ideals, but after decades of hard life, he finally realizes that his feet of clay cannot support his beautiful dreams like gold. At the time of exhaustion and old age, he looks back on his own life, but it is just a small role in the human tragedy that flashes by in a hurry. When Zeus grew up, he married Metis, the goddess of wisdom, whose Greek name means wisdom, skill, or craft. Metis was one of 3,000 Oceanids, born to the second Titan, Oceanus, god of the ocean rivers, and his wife, Thetis, who was also the second Titan. Metis brewed a special pot of poison and gave it to Zeus, who offered it to Cronus to drink, who spat out the swallowed children. And so Zeus's brother and sisters, the Olympians, were reborn, and they were
A Poseidon, presiding over the sea, storms, earthquakes, and horses. A Hades is the god of the dead and the king of the underworld. A Hera is the goddess of marriage, women, and family, and the protector of women enduring childbirth. A Demeter, presiding over crops, grains, food, and the fertility of the earth. A Hestia, meaning hearth or fireside, is the virgin goddess of the hearth and the home.
Being regenerate, they served Zeus as their chief, and under Zeus began a crusade against their father, Cronus, who ran to his own sister and brother, the Titans, and rallied them to resist the Olympian gods, waging the Battle of Titans, known as the Titanomachy. The two sides engaged in a fierce battle that lasted 10 years and nearly destroyed the universe. Eventually, the Olympian gods defeated the Titans. The defeated Titans were banished to Tartarus, the hell. Zeus became the supreme god king of the gods. To avoid his own brothers killing each other, he and his brothers, Poseidon and Hades, distributed power by drawing lots. Zeus was given the power of the sky and became the king of heaven. Poseidon was given the power of the sea and became the king of the sea. And Hades was given the power of the underworld and became the king of the underworld. After this, Zeus suffered from fear of offspring. It was prophesied that the children born to Metis would have the power to overthrow Zeus. Zeus outdid his father, Cronus, by coaxing Metis to turn into a fly and promptly swallowing his pregnant wife. Athena, the daughter of Zeus and Metis, was born in and sprang from Zeus' head. Prometheus created mankind as his brother for the purpose of creating a world parallel to the gods. Athena was born from the split head of Zeus, symbolizing a defiance and challenge to patriarchal power and kingship. This is why she helped Prometheus to create man, by injecting the soul into the human body. Zeus punished Prometheus, but let his daughter Athena go. Indeed, the father's love is like the ocean. An awesome father is better than your own lifelong struggle. The behavior of Cronus and Zeus in eating their own children likely reflects the ancient custom of humans eating their firstborn. The Chinese thinker Mozi lived during the same period as the ancient Greek philosopher Socrates. His ideas were recorded in the book Mozi.
Mozi said, "This is because habit affords convenience and custom carries approval." Anciently, east of the state of Yue, there was the tribe of Kaishu. Among them, the firstborn son was dismembered and devoured after birth, and this was said to be propitious for his younger brothers.
The Mozi, as well as many ancient Chinese texts, record the custom of some tribes around southern China that would cut their firstborn. But for the daughters, there was no need to kill them. The fact that Zeus didn't punish Athena should have something to do with Athena's female identity. As discussed in earlier chapters of this book, in central China, tribes from the Sumerian civilization were eventually routed by the Yellow Emperor tribes from Siberia and migrated to southern China. It is likely that this custom existed in the Sumerian civilization and spread to the Greek peninsula. Some scholars believe that killing the firstborn was likely a way to ensure that one's offspring were of the male husband's lineage. Considering the openness to sexual matters in ancient Greece, where there was a great deal of premarital sexual activity between men and women, it is likely that this was also a folk custom in ancient Greece, the purpose of which was to ensure the purity of the heir's lineage. Since women do not usually inherit the family business, there is no need to kill them. With the progress of civilization, the custom of cooking the firstborn son gradually disappeared. However, in order to ensure the purity of the lineage, the nomadic tribes on the northern steppe usually adopted the youngest son inheritance system, probably for the same reason. In ancient Greek mythology, the youngest son, Cronus, inherited the divine right of Uranus, and the youngest son, Zeus, inherited the divine right of Cronus, which may also be a reflection of this tradition in mythology. Athena, the beautiful goddess with wisdom, warfare, and handicraft, who was later syncretized with the Roman goddess Minerva. She was known as Peleus and Poliuchos, both derived from polis, meaning city-state. She is the patron goddess of Athens, from whom she is also supposed to have taken her name. The Mycenaean civilization, also known as Mycenaean Greece, arose in and around the Hellenic Peninsula from about 1750 to 1050 BC, was the last phase of the Bronze Age. The Mycenaean civilization was influenced by the Minoan civilization of Crete. It is known for its monumental architecture and its energetic art. It is often regarded as the first civilization in Europe. Around 3100 BC, the Minoan civilization entered the Neolithic or New Stone Age, and complex urban settlements began to appear around 2000 BC. After about 1450 BC, they were subjected to cultural and perhaps political domination by the Mycenaean civilization on the mainland, resulting in a hybrid culture that lasted until about 1100 BC. The Minoan and Mycenaean civilizations are known as the cradle of European civilization. and the jewel set in this cradle is Athens. Athenians have a rare love for the discernment of ideas and the articulation of language that few cities have matched since ancient times, even in contemporary times. Eugene Ban and Margaret Tell, Ban, in A History of Oral Interpretation, argue that to Greeks the spoken word was a living thing and infinitely preferable to the dead symbols of a written language. Socrates, known as the founder of Western philosophy and also a citizen of Athens, believed that once things are written down, they lose their ability to change and evolve. This is very much in line with the Chinese Zen saying,
A special transmission outside the scriptures, not established upon words and letters, directly pointing to the human heart-mind, seeing nature and becoming a Buddha.
Because of this, Athenian spoken literature, ballads, poetry, and theater were popular among Athenian citizens. Around 700 BC, ancient Greek theater began to emerge. Theater was gradually institutionalized as part of the Dionysia, the festival in honor of Dionysus, the god of wine. Dionysus is the god of winemaking, orchards and fruit, vegetation, fertility, festivity, insanity, ritual madness, religious ecstasy, and theater. He was also known as Bacchus by the Greeks, a name later adopted by the Romans for a frenzy he is said to induce called bacchia. In ancient Greece, hard-working people got rid of their self-conscious fears and worries and forgot about the oppressive bondage of the powerful through wine, music, and wild dancing. Rhea was the daughter of Uranus and Gaia, and she and her brother Cronus gave birth to the Olympian gods, including Zeus. The Greek male gods were erotically charged, always trying to inject their positive energy into any goddess or woman. In this regard, if Zeus was second, no one would dare to call oneself first. He didn't even spare his own mother. He courted her, and Rhea had to turn into a snake to escape. But Zeus also turned himself into a snake and raped her. As a result, Rhea gave birth to their daughter Persephone. At birth, Persephone was a deformed child, and a frightened Rhea abandoned her daughter and ran away. Later transformed into Demeter, she became the goddess of the harvest and agriculture, presiding over crops, grains, food, and the fertility of the earth. Persephone later lived in her mother's house, guarded by the Curetes. Growing up, Persephone was so gorgeous and turned the gods of Olympus on. Hermes, Apollo, Ares, and Hephaestus each presented Persephone with a gift to woo her. Fearing that Persephone would end up marrying the lame and ugly Hephaestus, Demeter consulted Astraeus, which name means starry, is an astrological deity. Astraeus looks up at the stars and peers down at Olympus again, then warns Demeter that Persephone will be raped and impregnated by a serpent. Demeter then hid Persephone in a cave, expecting to escape the cruelty of fate. But Zeus, once again disguised as a serpent, slipped into the cave and raped Persephone. Persephone became pregnant and gave birth to Zagreus. Zeus loved the sun so much that he took him to Mount Ida and gave him to the Curetes to guard. Zeus expected a grown Zagreus to succeed him as ruler of the universe. But his wife, the jealous Queen Hera, incited the Titans to kill the boy. The Titans lured the infant Zagreus with mirrors and other toys, then seized him and tore him to pieces. The Titans boiled the torn Zagreus in a cauldron and ate parts of it. Since no one liked Zagreus' phallus, it was thrown into the river. Athena managed to save Zagreus' heart and gave it to Zeus. One version of the story is that Demeter reassembled the pieces, thus rebirthing Zagreus without a phallus. Another version of the story is that Zeus ground up his heart, put it in a potion, and gave it to Semele to drink and reconceive. Semele is the youngest daughter of Cadmus, the founder of Thebes, and of Harmonia. She was also a priestess of Zeus and became the young mistress of the lustful Zeus. Hera, the wife of Zeus, poses as old crone to seduce Semele about her lover, and when she hears her speak of Zeus as her lover, Hera pretends not to believe it and plants the seeds of doubt in Semele's mind. Curious, Semele asks Zeus to grant her favors. Eager to please his beloved, Zeus promised to fulfill all her requests on the river Styx. She then asked Zeus to show his glory to prove his divinity. Zeus pleaded with her not to do so, but she insisted, and Zeus was forced by his oath to comply. Zeus showed her his smallest lightning bolts and the sparsest thunderstorm clouds he could find. However, mortals are incinerated at the sight of the gods, and she was thus consumed by the flames ignited by the lightning. However, Zeus saved the fetus and sewed it to his thigh. As a result, Zeus walked with a limp. A few months later, the reborn child was born with a new name, Dionysus, which means Zeus-Limp. Dionysus was also known as the twice-born. Aeschylus wrote the tragedy simile for this purpose, but it is sadly lost. The earliest known wines came from present-day Georgia, 6000 BC, Persia, 5000 BC, Armenia, 4100 BC, and Sicily c. 4000 BC. The grapes had to be crushed and then fermented in fermenting vats, or tanks, which is probably the image of Zagreus being torn into pieces and placed in a cauldron. The grape juice was sealed and fermented for a certain period of time, which is probably the secret Zeus sealed inside the thighs. In this way the grapes, Zagreus, were reborn again and became wine, Dionysus. Among the first of the dramatic genres to be born were the tragedy, which appeared around 500 BC, followed by the comedy and satyr dramas, which appeared in 490 BC. The styles and terminology of these plays have continued to influence European theater today. Thespis, the first famous actor recorded as performing tragedy, is also known as the father of tragedy. Another more famous father of tragedy is the tragedy writer Aeschylus. The oracle Aeschylus was killed by falling objects, so he stayed outdoors to avoid falling buildings. Instead, an eagle used Aeschylus' head as a stone that can smash the prey and dropped a tortoise, killing him. The works of Aeschylus were so respected by the Athenians that after his death, his tragedy was the only one allowed to be reenacted in subsequent competitions. Aeschylus wrote some 70 to 90 plays in his lifetime, 7 of which have survived. These include Prometheus Bound, which was written between about 479 and 424 BC. Of course, some scholars attribute this play to his son, the tragedian Euphorion. The Prometheus series is supposed to be a trilogy, and the 2 lost books are Prometheus Unbound and Prometheus the Firebringer. Prometheus Bound shows Prometheus being punished by Zeus for stealing fire and being chained to a rock in the mountains of Scythia. Scythia was the name given by the ancient Greeks to the nomadic zone of their northern steppes. And in the play, Prometheus foretells in advance that he will be punished and also foretells his fate. When Io, daughter of King Inachus of Argos, another woman possibly wooed by Zeus, seeks advice from Prometheus about her future, he informs Io of her end, and that one of her descendants who will become a liberator of himself. In Greek mythology, Io was a priestess of the Argos goddess Hera, who refused the advances of Zeus and was turned into a heifer by him. Hera begged Zeus to give her the heifer as a gift, and Zeus could not refuse, so he gave her to Hera. Gaia, the earth goddess, took pity on the unfortunate Io and created violetous fodder for cows. The various colors of the violet changed on account of Io's life: red for the blushing maiden, purple for the cow, white for the stars. Hera sent the many-eyed giant Argus to spy on Io and prevent Zeus from visiting her. Argus was a servant of Hera with 100 eyes, always watching in all directions. And even when asleep he had some eyes open to observe. There could not be a more perfect guardian than Argus. Hera charged him to tether this cow safely to an olive tree at Nemea. Zeus sends his right-hand man Hermes to clear the way for his cheating. Hermes is also the protector of human heralds, travelers, thieves, merchants, and orators. He approaches Argus disguised as a shepherd, first lulling him to sleep by playing panpipes and telling stories, then using his wand to close Argus' still open eyes. Finally, he beheaded Argus, earning him the nickname Argus Slayer. Hera, who dared not retaliate against Zeus for his infidelity, but only took it out on mortals, sent a gadfly to keep biting Io, driving her to wander around without rest. Io eventually crossed the path between Propontis and the Black Sea, hence the name Bosporus, or Bosphorus Strait. meaning cow passage or cattle passage. She then encountered Titan Prometheus, who was chained to Mount Caucasus by Zeus. Io recognizes Prometheus, the god who made man. She asks Prometheus to give her guidance. Prometheus, the forethought, knows of Io's future wanderings, but he hesitates because he knows that knowing one's own destiny only adds to the suffering of those who have no choice. Prometheus asks Io to make a choice. Does she want to hear about her future? Or does she want to hear the name of the man who will save Prometheus among her descendants? Io asks for two answers, one about Io's own fate and one about Prometheus' fate. Eventually, a hesitant Prometheus reveals the answer to his and her fate. Io's wanderings would end at the mouth of the Nile. There, Zeus would restore her to human form. She would give birth to a son, Epiphus. Epiphus will give birth to 50 daughters, all but one of whom will kill their husbands. The offspring of the daughter who did not kill her husband will put Prometheus out of his misery. Thus Io would become the ancestor of Heracles, the greatest hero on earth, who saved Prometheus. Prometheus, the heroic god who made man, declared at the same time that no matter how great Zeus was, his reign would eventually come to an end. Zeus had better prepare himself for the worst, because he can't hold the scepter in his hands forever, and no god has ever been able to control the world forever. Prometheus' prophecy reached Zeus, who sent a messenger, Hermes, to urge Prometheus to reveal the secret that would threaten Zeus. Prometheus refused. So Zeus sent eagles that flew every day during the day to tear out his liver and revive it at night. Tragedy is the narrative of human suffering. The greatest human suffering is the contradiction between the irresistibility of fate and the individual's desire to control his or her own life. The recurring theme in both Greek mythology and drama is the struggle against destiny, which is doomed to failure. Please follow me and subscribe to my channel. Please also share the stories I tell. I look forward to working with more people to completely unlock the mysteries of life's destiny in the ideas and myths by our no will. Life is about getting on the train before you buy a ticket. You don't know when you're going to get on. You don't know when you're going to get off. The only thing you can grasp is the present moment. With luck, you can buy a sitting ticket when you are close to getting off the train. Maybe you can still sit by the window, enjoying the last view of the journey. The unlucky ones, at some point, get kicked off the train in the middle of the journey. Io, the princess of Argos, who was turned into a heifer by the lustful Zeus, said goodbye to Prometheus and left the Caucasus Mountains. Continued her life's journey. Did she buy the view from the window? Follow me and subscribe to my channel. I look forward to you joining me as I trace the prophecies of Prometheus and unravel the destiny of men and ideas and myths by our no will. Io continues to wander. She reached the Golden Horn in Thrace, where there was the altar of the nymph Simistra. It was by the altar that she gave birth to her daughter Cheroessa. Her name means the horned, and she was raised by the nymph Simistra. As a beautiful adult, Cheroessa was a natural prey for power. Poseidon mated with her and gave birth to Byzas. Byzas later became the founder of Byzantium. Io wandered again to Euboea. In the cave called Busal, Epiphus was born. The name Epiphras means touch because he was conceived by the hand of Zeus touching Io. At Hera's direction, Epiphras was hidden by the Curetes. Io swam across the Ionian Sea, a sea whose name was called Ionia because of Io. The main islands in the eastern part of the sea are known as the Ionian Islands and belong to present-day Greece. The inhabitants of the islands were called Ionians. At the mouth of the Nile, Io was restored to human form by Zeus. When Zeus grew tired of his old love and went hunting for new beauty, Io found a good-natured man who was willing to take her as his wife. Telegonus, king of Egypt. His name means born afar. Io, whose destiny was probably to keep searching in the world, set out again to find her son. In Syria, she finally found her son Epiphras, who had been taken by the Curetes and raised by the wife of the king of Byblos here. As an adult, Epiphras married Memphis. Memphis' father was the Nile god Nilus. The second titan, Oceanus, with his wife Thetis, fathered 3,000 river gods, Potamoi, and 3,000 nymphs, Oceanides. As we mentioned earlier, Metis, the first wife of Zeus, was one of the Oceanides. 3,000 means many, and in short, all the gods or nymphs associated with rivers, streams, and ocean waters were descendants of Oceanus and Thetis. Nilus was one of the 3,000 Potamoi, representing the Nile River. This longest river in Africa is about 6,650 kilometers or 4,130 miles long, and covers 11 countries, including today's Democratic Republic of Congo, Tanzania, Burundi, Rwanda, Uganda, Kenya, Ethiopia, Eritrea, South Sudan, Sudan, and Egypt. Epaphras and Memphis had a daughter, Libya. Poseidon, the king of the sea, overpowered and raped Libya again, give birth to the twins, Belus and Agenor. Later, Beros ruled Egypt, and Agenor, the name means valor, manliness, ruled Sidon and Tyre, which the two cities were located in Phoenicia, which is nowadays located in Lebanon. Potamoi are the gods of rivers in Greek mythology. Oceanides are the nymphs associated with the sea. The rest of the freshwater nymphs of fountains, wells, springs, and streams were called naiads, who were both daughters of Nilus, the Nile River god. Belus then married Achairo, one of naiads, and had twins Aegyptus and Danaus. Aegyptus conquered the nearby country ruled by the people known as the Melampods or Melampods, named it Egypt, and became king of Egypt. Egypt gets its name from Aegyptus. Both he and his fellow brother Danaus were more raw and full of positive energy. Aegyptus had 50 sons with different women. Danaus fathered 50 daughters with different women and was known as Danaids. Since it was 50 to 50, the parentage would save the parents the trouble of finding compatible spouses for their children. Aegyptus then ordered his 50 sons to marry the 50 daughters of his brothers. For an ancient prophecy said that Danaus would be killed by his own son-in-law. To escape his doom, Danaus, on the advice of Athena, built a boat and fled Egypt with his 50 daughters. Because his ancestor Io was a princess of Argos, Danaus took his daughters and fled to Argos in a boat. The king of Argos at this time was Pelasgus, nicknamed He Who Laughs. The king took in Danaus and his daughters. Danaus invented well drilling in Argos and taught it to the local population. This developed from Argos to all parts of Greece around 1485 BC, and people began to draw water by drilling wells. The ancient Roman writer, naturalist, soldier, and statesman Gaius Plinius Secundus, also known as Pliny the Elder or Pliny the Great. He lived around the time when Lu Xu fought the Battle of Restoration to restore the Han Dynasty and founded the Eastern Han Dynasty in China. Pliny the Elder recorded this invention in his notes on natural history.
He, Danaus, may have introduced wells into Greece, but they had, long before his time, been employed in Egypt and in other countries. The term diption, thirsting, which it appears had been applied to the district of Argos, may seem to render it probable that, before the arrival of Danaus, the inhabitants had not adopted any artificial means of supplying themselves with water. But this country, we are told, is naturally well supplied with water.
Presumably it was too difficult for all 50 sons to find daughters-in-law with matching identities. Or it was just a matter of needing to keep the royal bloodline pure, as in the case of the Japanese royal family. After all, the Egyptian tradition, for the sake of the royal family to maintain the lineage of the gods, was one of consanguineous unions, in which not only siblings, but also fathers and daughters, could be married. Aegyptus also pursued Argos with his own 50 sons as well. Danaus consented to the marriage between the children of the brothers, but to avoid a divine disaster, he summoned his 50 daughters on the night before the wedding and ordered them to kill their husbands on the wedding night. On the wedding night, the eldest daughter, Hypernestra begged her husband, Lynceus, to keep her virginity. She thought this would avoid both the oracle and the bloodshed. But with the exception of the eldest daughter, the remaining 49 daughters of Danaus, the Danaids, killed their husbands while they slept. The next day, 49 widows buried the bridegroom's head at Lerna, an area of springs in a lagoon off the east coast of the Peloponnese, south of Argos. Much of the area was swampy, and the mythical Lernaean Hydra lived here. Then the Danaids held a funeral for the bodies of their husbands in front of the city. Aegyptus died of grief when he learned of his son's tragedy. Danaus imprisoned his disobedient eldest daughter, Hypernestra, in the Argive courts. Aphrodite, the goddess of sex, sympathized with Hypernestra and rescued her. The sole survivor, Lynceus, later killed Danaus and his 49 daughters and took the crown of Argos, since the gods had no tolerance for women actually killing their husbands. Therefore, the daughters of Danaus, after their deaths, were sent to Tartarus, the lowest level of the underworld, where they were punished for carrying water from the lower level up steep stone steps to the upper level, where they poured it into perforated containers. Only when it was full could they rest. Since the containers was perforated, they could never fill it. The punishment for drawing water also symbolizes the invention of the well that they and their father brought to Greece. This is consistent with Han mythology, where gods or people who benefit mankind are usually not able to be worshipped or have a perfect ending. On the contrary, those gods or people who send calamities to mankind can be better worshipped or revered. This myth also shares the same metaphor of eternally futile endeavors, an unrelieved destiny, with the stories of Sisyphus and Ocnus, Prometheus' liver, pecked by the eagle during the day and growing at night, has a similar meaning. The story is enacted in Aeschylus' play The Suppliants. Lynceus and Hypernestra, who became the new rulers of Argos. The reign of Danaus and his son-in-law, Lynceus, was known as the Danaid dynasty. The Lynceus and Hypernestra had a son, Abbas. Abbas was a successful conqueror and gained the favor of Hera, who blessed him with a shield that could withstand any sword. Even after Abbas' death, his enemies would flee at the mere sight of this shield. He founded the cities of Abi in the northeastern of ancient Phocis, and Argos Pelasgikon in Thessaly. Io's descendants had a tradition of having twins, and Abbas and his wife Ocalia had twin sons, Acrisius and Proetus, and a daughter, Idomene. Acrisius, whose name means ill judgment, and Proetus began fighting in their mother's womb, and legend has it that in the course of their fights they invented the shields or bucklers. After the death of Abbas, Proetus succeeded to the throne. The ancient Greeks were either pondering philosophical questions or chasing eroticism. They had heads of gold, strong bodies of bronze, and genitals of iron. Aside from the fact that they couldn't live forever, the Greeks had few goals in life that couldn't be challenged. So for Proetus, seducing his niece was nothing to make a fuss about. Blame it on the fact that Danae, the daughter of his twin brother Acrisius, was simply too beautiful. The beautiful Danae turned the twin brothers against each other completely, and the war between the two finally broke out. Acrisius defeated Proetus. After 17 years of reign, Proetus ceded his throne and fled to Lycia. Lycia is in present-day Turkey and includes the provinces of Antalya and Mora, as well as some inland areas of Burdor. At Iobates, or Amphianax, in Lycia, Proetus married a king's daughter, Sthenebia, meaning strong cow or strong through cattle. Having gained the support of his father-in-law, he once again marched back to Argos to make war with his brother. Eventually a ceasefire was reached and Acrisius ceded Tiryns and the eastern half of Argolis, the Varium, Medea, and the coast of Argolis. Acrisius, who has only daughters and no sons, is disappointed that he has no male heir, and asks the oracle at Delphi if this will change. The oracle tells him that he will not have a son and that he will be killed by his daughter's son. King Acrisius kept the beautiful Danae in a bronze chamber under his court to prevent her from being seduced by other men. However, all beauty cannot be shut away, and sexuality is something that even the gods cannot suppress. Like the cosmic force me in Sumerian mythology, she is the driving force and source of the world's evolution. Zeus, the king of the gods, the plunderer of all beauty, sent down golden rain that flowed from the roof of the catacombs into the womb of the beautiful woman. Soon their child, the demigod Perseus, was born. Unwilling to kill his grandson with his own hands, and fearful of provoking the wrath of the gods or the vengeance of the Furies, King Acrisius threw Danae and Perseus into the sea in a wooden box. Zeus then instructed Poseidon to protect the mother and child, and they drifted safely to Seriphos. Dictys, the brother of King Polydex, discovered Danae and Perseus inside a chest that had been washed upon shore or was caught in his fishing net. He treated them well and raised Perseus as his own son. Danae's luster was also something that King Polydex could not refuse. But Danae is not fond of the king. Instead of the divine power of Zeus and the roguish dominance of Zeus, the king hoped that he could rely on his own charms to win a woman's hand. But Perseus' protection of his mother prevented Polydeuces from achieving his goal. King Polydex announced his desire to marry Hippodameia in preparation for a marriage contest. Hippodameia, whose name means she who masters horses, was the daughter of Oenomaus, king of Pisa. Like the oracle given to Danaus, Oenomaus was told that he would be killed by his daughter's husband, his own son-in-law. He therefore demanded that all suitors would race against himself in a horse race, and the loser would be put to death. Polydeuces threw a great banquet and asked each guest involved to contribute a horse. Perseus had no horse to give, so he asked Polydex to name any other desired gift as a substitute for a horse. Whatever the gift was, he would obtain it. Polydex then presented his request, the head of Medusa. Medusa was originally a priestess of the temple of Athena. Ancient Greeks made offerings to the gods in their temples, offering their own sacrifices. Of course, the will of the gods, the oracle, was also requested for important decisions. We will often see oracles in Greek mythology, especially at Delphi. Delphi was known as Pytho in the time of Homer, and it was a municipality located in the region of Phocis in central ancient Greece. It was also considered by the ancient Greeks to be the center of the world and a holy place dedicated to Apollo. The priestess here was called Pythia. Diodorus Siculus, or Diodorus of Sicily, was a historian of the 1st century BC. He wrote the monumental Bibliotheca Historica, which consisted of 40 volumes, 15 of which survived intact between 60 and 2030 BC. In his account, a shepherd named Cretors, who occasionally found one of his goats falling into a crack in the earth, exhibited bizarre behavior. Upon entering the crevice himself, he found himself filled with divine power and able to see beyond the present into the world of the past and future. He excitedly shares his discovery with nearby villagers. Around 1600 BC, many people began to visit the site to experience convulsions and trances, and legend has it that some disappeared into the chasm due to the frenzy. After a number of men died, the villagers chose a single young woman as the liaison for the divine inspirations. Eventually, she came to speak on behalf of the gods.
Echecrates, the Thessalian, having arrived at the shrine and beheld the virgin who uttered the oracle, became enamored of her because of her beauty, carried her away and violated her. And that the Delphians, because of this deplorable occurrence, passed a law that in the future a virgin should no longer prophesy, but that an elderly woman of 50 would declare the oracles, and that she would be dressed in the costume of a virgin, as a sort of reminder of the prophetess of olden times.
The oracle is not so much a prediction of the future as a declaration of divinely determined destiny. All those who accept the oracle try to reject the divine determination and do their best to control their own destiny. But in the end, they fail hopelessly. Please follow me, and I hope you share the secrets of the myths I reveal. Before we begin the next chapter of our hero's journey, let's share the Delphic maxims.
1. Know thyself. 2. Nothing in excess or moderation. 3. Surety brings ruin.
In the age of power, a woman's beauty was the original sin. A beautiful woman is either the prey of heroes or a sacrifice on the altar of gods. Both men and gods kiss the power and bully the weak. Beauty is but the cost that builds their careers and achieves praised performance. Here is the story not only of how the beautiful castrated corpse became a stepping stone for the hero, but also of how the maiden who was tightly bound and abused on the cliffs of the sea is now in the sky, mocking the heroes of earth. Please follow me and subscribe to my channel. I look forward to you joining me in uncovering the meanness and cowardice behind the heroes, the so-called great ones. Follow the trail of destiny and gain insight into human nature and ideas and myths by our no will. In Greek mythology, the universe began with chaos. Chaos gave birth to Erebus, meaning darkness, gloom. Subsequently, one version says that chaos gave birth to Nyx, meaning night. Another version says that Erebus gave birth to Nyx. The mating of dark Erebus and night Nyx gave birth to Ether, which is the personification of the bright upper sky, and Hemera is the personification of day. This narrative is a metaphor for light coming from darkness and that day is born of night. The sea Pontus was born of the mating of Ether and Gaia, the first primordial god and mother of the earth. According to Hesiod, Pontus was born of Gaia's asexual reproduction. Gaia's fingertips also gave birth asexually to Uranus and then asexually to Re. Then Gaia and her son Uranus gave birth to the 12 Titans. Among the Titans was Pontus, meaning sea. When the youngest Titan, Cronus, had castrated his father, Uranus, Gaia had intercourse with her own son, Pontus, and gave birth to a son, Nereus, meaning old man of the sea. Then another intercourse gave birth to Thaumas, meaning wonder, who personified the dangers of the sea. Then came Phorcys, also a sea god. 2 daughters were born of the union of Gaia and Pontus. The elder daughter, Ceto, literally means sea monster. The youngest daughter, Eurybia, meaning wide force. It should be clear here that Poseidon is the king of the sea, who rules the sea. Pontos, the Titan, is the sea itself. The son of Gaia and Pontus, Nereus, the old man of the sea, represents the gentle and calm side of the sea, and his daughter, Ceto, represents the stormy and dangerous side of the sea. And Phorcys is simply the god who lives in the sea. In another version of the legend, he was king of Sardinia and Corsica, defeated in a naval battle with King Atlas in the Tyrrhenian Sea. After his death, he became a half-man, half-ram living in the sea. Atlas here is not that brother of Prometheus, but the king of Atlantis or Mauritania. The half-human, half-ram Phorcys was actually a monster of sorts, who mated with the sea monstress Ceto and gave birth to a group of sea monsters collectively known as Phorcides. Among them were the 3 sisters Gorgons, which literally means grim or dreadful. The eldest, Stheno, means forceful. The second, Euryale, means far-roaming. And the third, Medusa, literally guardian, protectress. The 3 sisters of the Gorgons are all beautiful and attractive creatures of the earth. The reason they became demons with snakes for hair began with a dispute between Poseidon and Athena. The founder of the city of Athens was Cecrops, who naturally became the first king of the Athenian city-state. Cecrops was also the founder of the institution of marriage. He expected the gods to compete, and the winner would become the patron god of Athens and receive a sacrifice from Athens. The competition was conducted by the gods giving a gift to the city of Athens, and the citizens of Athens voting on the winner. Poseidon struck the ground with his trident and made a spring of salty water gushed forth, that brought trade and water to the Athenians and prompted Athens became a maritime power. Another version is that Poseidon gave the Athenians a horse. Athena went to the hill on the Acropolis and with her spear grew an olive tree, which she planted on the hill. The olive tree brought wood, oil, and food, and the olive later became a symbol of Athens' economic prosperity. Both gifts from the gods brought wealth to Athens. But mortals are subjective creatures, and they prefer to substitute their position for their minds, to substitute where their asses sit for rational thought. In the vote, Athenian men voted for the male god while women voted for the goddess. Because there was one more woman than man in Athens at that time, Athena won and became the protector god of the city. The defeated Poseidon really lacked manhood. In a fit of rage, he flooded the Thracia plain outside Athens and sank Attica to the bottom of the sea. Then one of his sons, Halirrhothius, meaning sea foam, was sent to cut down the olive tree Athena had planted. Halirrhothius did not cut accurately. He lost his life while his axe fell on himself. In another version, on the beach of the city of Athens, Halirrhothius sees a beautiful woman, and without inquiring who she was, he raped her. Halirrhothius has probably gotten used to raping beautiful women and bullying honest people because of his dad, Poseidon. Unfortunately, this time, Halirrhothius was careless and hit the muzzle. No, he messed with the wrong god. The beautiful woman was Alcippe, whose father was Ares, the god of war and courage. Her mother was Aglaris, princess of Athens and daughter of King Cecrops. Thus enraged, Ares killed Halirrhothius. The enraged Poseidon took Ares to Zeus. The court of the gods held a trial on a natural rock outside Athens and found Ares not guilty. The rock became known as the Areopagus. It was here that all the trials for murder in the city-state of Athens took place. Poseidon decides to take revenge on the Athenian temple dedicated to Athena. In the temple, he found Medusa, Athena's beautiful priestess. The poet Ovid, whose full name is Publius Ovidius Naso, lived at the time of the founding of the ancient Roman Empire. Augustus ruled. Augustus's full name is Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus, simply as Octavian. Ovid lived at the same time as Virgil and Horace. All of them rank among the three canonical poets of Latin literature. Ovid praises Medusa as a young girl with beautiful blonde hair. She was a priestess of Athena and swore a lifelong vow of celibacy to the divine virgin Athena. Seduced by Medusa's beautiful blonde hair, and in order to humiliate Athena, Poseidon raped her in Athena's temple. Although she was the daughter of Zeus, Athena did not have the courage of Ares to challenge the king of the sea. After enduring Poseidon's humiliation herself, Athena threw her anger at Medusa, who had been humiliated and ravaged, and cursed the three Medusa sisters to become horrible and ugly monsters. The blonde hair of all three turned into horrible snakes, and anyone who saw them would be turned to stone so that no man could ever come near them and have sex with them again. The two sisters of Medusa, who had nothing to do with it, were actually cursed, and there is truly no justice in the face of the arrogance and power of the gods. Aeschylus, the father of tragedy, wrote in his famous tragedy Prometheus Bound,
"Near them their sisters three, the Gorgons, winged, with snakes for hair, hatred of mortal man."
Perseus does not know where Medusa is, but as the illegitimate child of Zeus, helped by the gods, Athena, not daring to challenge Poseidon, only dared to punish the insulted and injured Medusa. She handed Perseus a mirrored shield and told him that he could view Medusa in the reflection of this shield without turning to stone. She also gave him wings with which to fly and instructed him to go to the Graeae and inquire about the survival of Gorgons. Graeae, meaning old women, alternatively spelled Graeae or Gray, were three sisters who had gray hair from their birth and shared one eye and one tooth among them. They were the daughters of the siblings Phorcys and Ceto. They were also Gorgon's sisters. They were also called the Gray Sisters and the Phorcydes. They entered their pale age with hardly any childhood, and the three of them took turns using one eye and one tooth. When one of them gave the eye to the other, Perseus took the one and only eye. In exchange, Perseus demands that Greae reveal Gorgon's abode. Perseus also demanded that they lead him to Hesperides, before returning the one and only eye to them. Hesperides were nymphs of the evening and sunset golden light, who were the daughters of the evening or nymphs of the west. They were also known as Atlantides, derived from their reputed father, Atlas, brother of Prometheus. The nymphs sometimes spell nymph. Nymphs were female nature deities representing different incarnations of nature in ancient Greek mythology. They were immortal like other goddesses. Hesperides gave Perseus a kibyssus, meaning bag or knapsack, that could use to store Medusa's head safely. Hermes, the herald of the gods, lent Perseus sandals with wings that would allow him to fly. Hephaestus, the god of blacksmiths and fire, gave him the adamantine harp that could decapitate Medusa. Hades, the god of the dead and the king of the underworld, gave him the helm of invisibility. Another version of the legend has it that all three of these treasures, which could kill Medusa, were also given by Hesperides. Perseus put on his flying shoes and followed Greae's instructions to the cave where Gorgon had lived. By observing Medusa's reflection in his mirrored shield, he safely approaches and beheads her. Medusa, when decapitated, sprang from her neck with Pegasus, a winged horse, and Chryser, meaning he who has a golden sword. Polygnotus was a Greek painter who lived in the 5th century BC, consistent with the description of the ancient Roman poet Ovid. Medusa is also a beautiful maiden in Polygnotus' works. Medusa was pregnant after being raped by Poseidon. Perseus cut off the head of the pregnant Medusa while she was asleep. According to some other versions, the beautiful Medusa's head only possessed the magical power to turn people to stone after her death, as killing the tender maiden in her sleep was rather unheroic. Perseus' heroic behavior has been repeatedly mocked by some literature. In Medusa's legend, the gods and heroes are vile and cowardly. They are just displaying, once again, fear and fawning in the face of might. As long as there is no danger, they are exuberant and courageous towards the weak, and their performance is nothing more than a humiliation of the word hero.
They are brave when there is no danger. They are generous when there is no price to pay. It is in shallow stories that they move. It is in the midst of foolish agitations that they are sincere.
Awakened, Medusa's two sisters, discovering their tragically dead sister, frantically chase after Perseus. But Perseus escapes, wearing a dark helmet that allows him to be invisible, as Hermes instructed him to do. A year after his death, in 1940, Sigmund Freud published his Medusa's Head. In that text's analysis, he argues that the beheading of the snake-haired Medusa symbolizes the castration of the penis. Freud believed that Medusa's horror reflected the young boy's castration complex, and that when he saw female genitalia, he understood the fact that women did not have penises. Medusa's serpentine hair represents the male phallus, as well as the authority of the father. Castration also represents a challenge to patriarchal authority, and it was after castrating the phallus of his father, Uranus, that Cronus became the second main god. The beauty covered by hair also represents the female pubic area at the same time. The gorgeous Medusa also represents the memory of her mother in the age of innocence. Looking at her mother, who is imprisoned, with her genitals covered with hair, the subject's illicit desires become rigid and frozen in fear of her father's retaliation.
We don't often single out explanations for mythological characters, but the explanation for the fearsome, severed head Medusa is readily available. Severed head equal castration. Medusa's terror is also the fear of castration, associated with seeing something. From many analyzed experiences, we know that this moment occurs when the boys, who until then still did not believe in the threat, have just glimpsed the female genitalia for a few moments. It is highly probable that the adult is entangled in the hair, and that the organ actually belongs to the mother. If Medusa's hairs are often presented as serpentine in works of art, this is because they come from a castration complex. And it is worth noting that whatever horrific results these serpentine hairs cause, They are actually used to minimize the horror because they are used to replace the penis, the absence of which is the cause of the horror. A rule of analysis shows that the numerous representations of castration symbolized by the penis are hereby confirmed. The sight of Medusa's head causes a man to be so frightened that he cannot move, and the man who sees it turns to stone. This is the same sentiment from castration with the same emotional transformation, because the rigid immobilization indicates an erection. In this original situation, the viewer is relieved that he still possesses a penis, and the rigid hardening assures him of this. Athena, the goddess of virginity, wore this horrific symbol on her costume. Quite literally, she became inapproachable as a woman, resisting all sexual desires, and she displayed her mother's horrific sexual organs. By and large, the Greeks had strong homosexual tendencies and could not help but present women as horrific and repugnant due to their emasculation. If Medusa's head replaces the presentation of the female sexual organs, and more precisely if it isolates the frightening effect in the creation of pleasure, then we can readily recall that in other situations the presentation of the sexual organs is an act of exorcism. That which frightens oneself also frightens the enemy one is trying to defend oneself against. In Rabelais, we have women presenting their private parts to frighten demons into fleeing. The erection of the male sexual organ also has the effect of warding off evil, but by another mechanism. Presenting a penis or any other alternative is to say, I am not afraid of you, I defy you, I have a penis. This is another way to intimidate evil spirits. In order to get a more rigorous confirmation of this interpretation, it is necessary to investigate further in Greek mythology the origin of this isolated, lurid symbol and the circumstances in which it may be contrasted in other myths.
Freud further elaborates that Medusa has significance for both boys and girls in terms of fear of sex and cognitive growth. At the same time, Medusa represents the truth, the natural origin of the world. One tries to avoid looking Medusa in the eye because the heart is running away from the depressing reality.
I cannot help remembering a remark of de Caceres. It was over the wine in Mucans. Said he, the profoundest instinct in man is to war against the truth, that is, against the real. He shuns facts from his infancy. His life is a perpetual evasion. Miracle, chimera, and tomorrow keep him alive. He lives on fiction and myth. It is the lie that makes him free. Animals alone are given the privilege of lifting the veil of the Isis. Men dare not. The animal, awake, has no fictional escape from the real because he has no imagination. Man, awake, is compelled to seek a perpetual escape into hope, belief, fable, art, God, socialism, immortality, alcohol, love. From Medusa truth, he makes an appeal to Maya lie.
Jack London was an American novelist, journalist, and activist, as well as a pioneer of commercial fiction in American magazines. He was later known as an innovator of science fiction. The Isis of his text is a major goddess in ancient Egyptian religion, who was considered the divine mother of the pharaohs, also known as the mistress of life, ruler of fate and destiny. Isis has the ability to predict or influence future events and determine the length and quality of human life. Maya has several meanings in Indian philosophy. In later Vedic texts, Maya connotes a magic show, an illusion where things appear to be present but are not what they seem. The principle shows a tributeless absolute as having attributes. Maya also connotes that which is constantly changing and thus is spiritually unreal, in opposition to an unchanging absolute, or Brahman, and therefore conceals the true character of spiritual reality. In another legend, Medusa prayed to Athena after being raped, begging for forgiveness. Athena didn't punish Medusa and gave Medusa the ability to protect herself from men, so she would never be raped again. And Perseus, seeing Medusa's beauty, virtue, and goodness, was once again ready to rape her. Due to Athena's curse, Perseus is unable to penetrate with his penis, and in his irritation, cuts off her head. Medusa, because of her ability to defend herself, is eventually murdered. As time passes, Medusa has been revealed with multiple meanings. Like most people, as a foil to the heroes, as a victim of heroism, and as a cost in the history of greatness. Medusa represents the destiny of ordinary people, mirroring the vileness of the great ones. Medusa was still gazing at the humans, and people have long since gotten used to it, pretending she doesn't exist. Please follow me and subscribe to my channel. Please also share our discussions. I look forward to more people joining us in exploring the theme of human destiny by following in Arno Will's footsteps as documented in Ideas and Myths. When even the pleasure of sex cannot be satisfied, human beings self-created dopamine that can bring pleasure. This is the meaning of sadomasochism, masochism, SM for short. The former, through the control of power, realizes the desire for power that is missing in the real world. The latter, through sexual intercourse under obedience and humiliation, uses painful repression to accumulate pleasure that can erupt at a rapid pace. Sacrifice and offering are both exchanges and meanings that human beings attach to themselves to increase the fulfillment of their psychological needs. The crushed cherry blossoms have more value than the cherry blossoms themselves. The cherry blossoms themselves are simply the beauty of nature, reflected in the eyes of people. The destroyed cherry blossoms are the action of man, attached to his heart with more emotion. Follow me and subscribe to my channel. Your support is what motivates me to pick up the mysteries. I look forward to more people joining me in exploring those original SM stories in Arno Will's magnum opus, Ideas and Myths. Both men and gods fear the truth. The cowardice of mortals avoids seeing the truth. The gods and heroes, on the other hand, destroy the truth according to the power in their hands. Poseidon's rape of the beautiful priestess Medusa represents an insult and mockery of the truth. Athena punishes the insulted and victimized Medusa by turning her into a snake demon, distorting the truth itself. Legend has it that those who see Medusa's serpent-haired head will be turned to stone, which represents the fear and avoidance of the truth within people. Perseus' beheading of Medusa represents the fact that everyone can be an accomplice to power when it is safe to do so. The so-called heroes under power. By placing Medusa's head into Hesperides' kibyssus, mankind can thenceforth pretend that there is no more truth, although the truth is actually always gazing at despicable and cowardly mankind. Matthew Prior was an English poet and diplomat. He lived at a time that coincided with the Glorious Revolution in English history. This revolution was a major victory for British constitutionalism, but a setback in mankind's quest for equal rights. For details, please refer to the Millennium AD, Gamble on the Fate of the Nation. At the time, far to the east, China was in the midst of one of the darkest eras in its history, the Qing dynasty. Matthew Prior lived in the same era as Nalanzing, the most famous poet of the Qing dynasty. His poem Truth and Falsehood, a Tale, illustrates a stark truth.
Once on a time, in sunshine weather, falsehood and truth walked out together, the neighboring woods and lawns to view, as opposites will sometimes do. Through many a blooming mead they passed, and at a brook arrived at last. The purling stream, the margin green, with flowers bedecked, a vernal scene, invited each itinerant maid to rest a while beneath the shade. Under spreading beech they sat, and passed the time with female chat, while each her farts the other feigned. At length, quoth falsehood, sister truth, for so she called her from her youth, what if, to shun yon sultry beam, we bathe in this delightful stream, the bottom smooth, the water clear, and there's no prying shepherd near? With all my heart, the nymph replied, and threw her snowy robes aside, stripped herself naked to the skin, and with a spring leaped headlong in. Falsehood more leisurely undressed, and laying by her tawdry vest, tricked herself out in truth's array, and crossed the meadows tripped away. From this cursed hour the fraudful dame of sacred truth usurps the name, and with a vile perfidious mind roams far and near to cheat mankind. False sighs suborns and artful tears, and starts with vain pretended fears. In visits vain still appears most wise, and rolls at church her saint-like eyes. Tarks very much, plays idle tricks, while rising stock her conscience pricks. When being, poor thing, extremely gravelled, she secrets soaped and all unravelled. But on she will, and secrets tell, of John and Joan, and Ned and Nell, revealing every one she knows, as fancy leads, beneath their rose. Her tongue so voluble and kind, it always runs before her mind. As times do serve she slily pleads, and copious tears still show her needs. With promises as thick as weeds, speaks pro and con, is wondrous civil, today a saint, tomorrow devil. Poor truth she stripped, as has been said, and naked left the lovely maid, who, scorning from her cause to wince, has gone stark naked ever since, and ever naked will appear, beloved by all who truth revere.
The opposite of the truth is the lie, but they always appear in pairs. The goal of a lie is to cover up the truth, and the best way to do that is to keep people from looking at the truth and believing it. This story comes from The Blinding of Truth by Falsehood, a story from the 19th dynasty during the New Kingdom period in Egypt. The New Kingdom was the ancient Egyptian empire that lasted from the 16th century BC to the 11th century BC. This period of ancient Egyptian history includes the 18th, 19th, and 20th dynasties. Radiocarbon dating places the establishment of the New Kingdom between 1570 and 1544 BC. That was Egypt's most prosperous period and marked the peak of its power. In the story The Blinding of Truth by Falsehood, Jereg, representing falsehood, accuses Mot, representing truth, to the Egyptian god Enlil. Enlil was the earliest group of gods in ancient Egypt, totaling 9. Enlil believed Greg's accusations, sentenced Greg to blind Mot, and forced Mot to watch the door for Greg. Although Mot did his duty, the lies could not hold the truth, and Greg ordered 2 servants to take Mot to the desert so that lions could eat Mot. The servants let Mot live, and a beautiful lady takes Mot and marries him, and has a son. This son grows up to know the truth and pleads his case to Enlil, convinced that Mot was long dead. Greg swore to God that he would willingly blind himself if he found Mot alive. When Mot showed up, the god ruled that Greg had blinded himself and was watching the door for Mot. Man is always blind to the truth, but at the same time, the truth is the mirror of man, reflecting his own heart. Therefore, the punishment of blindness is a metaphor for man's refusal to look into his own heart in the face of the truth. The naked truth has 2 meanings. First, the truth has no pretense, unlike lies, which are always dressed in brightly colored clothing. Secondly, the naked truth mirrors the human being himself, creating a huge contrast between the shame of reality and the glory of ideals, causing human beings to choose to turn a blind eye to the truth even when they see it. Myths are the storytelling narratives of ancient human concepts, and the ancients, who were not imprisoned in the forbidden zones of thought, condensed the essence of their thinking in these legends. This is the reason why we would rather go further to reveal the fables of ancient thinking than to explore the lies beneath the beautiful veneer under the yoke of political correctness. Prometheus' father, Iapetus, was responsible for holding down the western limb of Uranus when Cronus emasculated their father, Uranus. Thus, Iapetus later became the pillar responsible for supporting the western sky. After losing the Battle of Titan, Iapetus was imprisoned in Tartarus. His son, Prometheus' brother Atlas, also known as Atlas Telemann, was responsible for continuing to hold up the western sky. Atlas was also known as Enduring Atlas. Atlas witnessed the heroic deeds of 2 demigods, the cruelty of Perseus and the deceit of Hercules. Cruelty and deceit are also the original evils of human beings. Hesiod was an ancient Greek poet generally thought to have been active between 750 and 650 BC, around the same time as Homer. He regarded the four sons of Iapetus as the common ancestors of mankind. Thus, the bad qualities of mankind are inherited from these four gods. Prometheus, the forethought, for cunning. Epimetheus, the afterthought, for stupidity. Atlas, the hard and enduring, for excessive boldness. And Menetius, the doomed might, for rash violence. Iapetus, as the ancestor of mankind, is considered equivalent to Japheth, son of Noah, who was the ancestor of the Japhetites. The Japheths are considered to be Indo-European-speaking people. In Ovid's narrative, Atlas is the king of a country located in northwest Africa. According to Plato, Atlas' kingdom was Atlantis. There is also a legend that he was the king of Mauritania. Of course, some scholars believe that Atlas and Prometheus' brother would have been two people. Perseus came to the kingdom of Atlas, claiming to be the son of Zeus and asking for asylum. Fearing that Zeus' son would steal his golden apples from his orchard, Atlas refused to admit Perseus. So Perseus showed Atlas the head of Medusa and turned Atlas into stone. Atlas's head became mountains, Atlas Mountains. His shoulders became ridges, and his hair became woods. The Atlas Mountains are located in the Maghreb of North Africa. Its highest peak, Toubkal, is located in central Morocco, at an elevation of 4,167 meters or 13,671 feet above sea level. The Atlas Mountains stretch for about 2,500 kilometers or 1,600 miles through Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia, separating the Sahara Desert, the Mediterranean Sea, and the Atlantic Ocean. The Atlantic takes its name from the mountains. Andromeda was the daughter of Cepheus, king of Ethiopia, and Cassiopeia. Like Medusa, her beauty was her original sin. The haughty and vain Cassiopeia boasted that her daughter, Andromeda, was more beautiful than all the Nereids. She forgets that beauty without the ability to protect it is but prey to the jockeying for power. Daris was one of the 3,000 nymphs Oceanids. She married Nereus, the old man of the sea, and gave birth to 50 beautiful daughters, known as Nereids. They lived in the Mediterranean Sea in the company of Poseidon. Of the 50 Nereids, Amphitrite was favored by Poseidon. Amphitrite fled to the Atlas Mountains to protect her virginity. Poseidon sent many creatures to search for her, and a dolphin came across Amphitrite and convinced her to marry Poseidon. In return for the dolphin's help, Poseidon planted her in the sky as the constellation Delphinus. Cassiopeia's braggadocio aroused the wrath of Amphitrite, who appealed to the sea king. Poseidon sent the sea monster Ceto to attack Ethiopia. Panicked, the Ethiopian king, Cepheus, sought the advice of Ammon, a god-king in African-Egyptian mythology. Ammon gave an oracle that the wrath of the sea could not be appeased unless the king sacrificed his daughter Andromeda to Cetus for devouring. So Andromeda was stripped naked and chained to a rock by the sea at Jaffa to be sacrificed. BDSM is a sexual activity between adults. Here B is for bondage. D is for discipline or dominance. S is for sadism. And M is for masochism. The earliest BDSM records are associated with the Sumerian mythological goddess Inanna, also known as Ishtar and Astarte. Inanna was the holy goddess and mistress of the heavens, or queen of heaven, in Sumerian mythology. In Sumerian, she is usually pronounced Ninanna. She was the god of sex, reproduction, and war in ancient Mesopotamian mythology, and was also associated with divine law and political power, as well as the planet Venus, holding the sweet waters of rivers and fertile male semen. Inanna was believed to be the prototype of Aphrodite and Athena. Inanna was especially beloved by the Assyrians, who elevated her to the highest deity in the pantheon, above Ashur, their national god. She is the Inanna/Ishtar mentioned in the Hebrew Bible. Inanna, also known as the Lady of Heaven, is either on the road to war or on the road to sex. She was on the road every day looking for young men to have sex with, and with human men, she needed water, the symbol of life. She was the patron saint of the ancient city of Uruk. The city was also known as the Holy City of Prostitutes, and it was believed that Inanna was the protector of prostitutes and taverns. The Temple of Inanna means House of Heaven. The world's first sacred prostitutes were found here, and the priestesses here represented the goddess Inanna and provided sexual services to worshippers in the name of worship. Rituals such as cross-dressing and transfiguration are described in ancient writings, such as the Inanna in Ebe and the Hymn to Inanna.
Imbued with pain and ecstasy, bringing about initiation and journeys of altered states of consciousness, punishment, moaning, ecstasy, lament, and song, participants exhausting themselves in weeping and grief.
In Japan, cherry blossoms represent the ultimate beauty and the shortness of life. The cherry blossom petals crushed by the spring winds and scattered all over the ground also represent the other side of the destroyed beauty, the beauty of mutilation. Beauty, with powerlessness and brokenness, is also the mirror image of ordinary people in the era of rampant power. The forbidden beauty of the bondage attracts Perseus, who was passing through the area in his flying shoes. Falling in love at first sight, Perseus asks Cepheus for a promise to marry Andromeda if he can kill the sea monster. After receiving a definite answer, Perseus uses Medusa's head to turn the monster into stone. This act, which we have already analyzed in the previous section, represents repelling the demon by exposing the sexual organs in Freud's psychoanalysis. But before that, Andromeda had been betrothed to her uncle, Phineus, king of Thrace. At the wedding site of Perseus and Andromeda, Phineus swung his spear and attacked Perseus. Perseus again used Medusa's head and turned Phineus and his retinues to stone. Poseidon elevated the slain sea monsters into the sky and turned them into Cetus. Believing that Cassiopeia should not escape punishment, he placed her in the sky and chained her to the throne as Cassiopeia. This constellation originally represented the chair of torture. After her death, Andromeda was also placed in the sky by Athena as Andromeda. This constellation is pictured with Andromeda's limbs forced to unfold into a tortured position. In the end, two women have been forced to undergo the absolute punishment of BDSM forever, simply because of their beauty. After living at the court of Cepheus for about a year, Perseus and Andromeda had a son, Perses. Because Cepheus had no male heir, Perses was adopted. Greek mythology identifies Perses as the ancestor of the Persians. Only then did Perseus and Andromeda leave Ethiopia. Cepheus became a constellation named Cepheus after his death. Perseus became a constellation named Perseus when he died. The English poet John Keats is known as the second generation of Romantic poets, along with Byron and Shelley. In the East, Nayland Zingd, the most famous poet of the Qing dynasty, had been dead for more than 100 years. Subsequently, Gong Zizhen, a literary scholar of the Qing dynasty, was deeply concerned about the decline of the Chinese literary scene under confinement and was speaking out.
A storm is urgently needed to wash away the deadness of China. No horses are neighing. Silence reigns. I urge the God of heaven to revitalize his spirit. Don't be formal and send down more talents.
John Keats, in On the Sonnet, expounds on the power of bondage on the human mind. The more beautiful it is in bondage, the more it presents a fleeting and moving force. This is also in the poem, a paraphrase of the story of Andromeda. The poem also recites another pair of human contradictions, rebellion and bondage.
If by dull rhymes our English must be chained, and like Andromeda, the sonnet sweet, fettered in spite of pained loveliness, let us find out if we must be constrained. Sandals more interwoven and complete to fit the naked foot of poesy. Let us inspect the lyre and weigh the stress of every chord and see what may be gained by ear industrious and attention meet, misers of sound and syllable, no less than Midas of his coinage. Let us be jealous of dead leaves in the bay-wreath crowd. So, if we may not let the muse be free, she will be bound with garlands of her own.
Truth frustrates, lies delight. Please follow me, share me, and I look forward to you and me, with many more. Tearing away more of the masquerade of truth and myth, the poeticized philosophy. The expulsion of evil spirits and enemies by exposing the nether regions is not only found in mythology, but also abundantly in Eastern and Western history. Perseus prepares to return to Seriphos. While flying over the Libyan desert, the blood dripping from Medusa's head formed a class of vipers. One of them later killed the prophet Mopsus. In gratitude for Athena's help, Perseus offered Medusa's head to Athena. Athena placed Medusa's head on her shield. According to Freud's analysis, Athena became unapproachable as a woman, resisting all sexual desires, and she displayed her mother's horrific sexual organs. He further elaborates that in order to get a more rigorous confirmation of this interpretation, it is necessary to investigate further in Greek mythology the origin of this isolated Lord symbol and the circumstances in which it may be contrasted in other myths. It's unfortunately Freud didn't see more events like this during his lifetime. Please follow me and subscribe to my channel. Today, I will continue Freud's unfinished business by introducing you to the Yin-Gate formations of the ancient East. Chai Xiaofan was a native of Yangshan Tianyang Village, Jiaqi Town, Cixi City, Zhejiang Province, China. He was born when the Independent Labour Party, the first socialist party in British history, was founded on January 13, 1893. The party explicitly advocated the abolition of private property rights and the adoption of collective ownership. It also advocated an 8-hour workday, a ban on child labor, and the introduction of social insurance. It may be impossible to believe that George Orwell, who wrote the famous anti-utopian novels Animal Farm in 1984, joined the Independent Labour Party in 1938. The party merged in 1975 into the Labour Party. The birth of Chai Xiaofan coincided with another, more important event, the coup d'etat in the Kingdom of Hawaii on January 17, 1893, and the subsequent invasion of Hawaii by the U.S. Marines. On August 12 of the same year, the U.S. officially annexed Hawaii, making the U.S. the dominant power in the Pacific Ocean. In the year of Chai Xiaofan's death, on January 20, Edward VIII, who loved beauties instead of the royal throne, was crowned King of England. On March 7, Germany entered the Rhineland. The failure of Britain and France to take any action was tantamount to encouraging Adolf Hitler and kicking off World War II. On May 5, 1936, the Republic of China officially promulgated the May 5 Charter, or the draft Constitution of the Republic of China. The Constitution of the Republic of China, which was modeled on this draft, was adopted and came into effect on December 25, 1946, and continues to this day. The Constitution of the Republic of China is based on the concept that belongs to the people and specifies the guarantees of the people's rights to freedom and liberty, as well as the system of a central government with 5 branches of government and a system of local autonomy. According to the Constitution, there is only one China, and the Republic of China has sovereignty over China, with its territory extending to the whole of China by its inherent boundaries. But the current scope of its rule extends only to the free areas, i.e., Taiwan, Penghu, Kinmen, and Mazu, not to the mainland areas of its legal boundaries, i.e., one country, 2 regions. Chai Xiaofan spent 10 years completing the book Fantian Lukanlu, which consisted of 37 volumes and more than 560,000 words and was published in 1926 by the Zhonghua Company. The book records the historical fact that in 1894, the government army was suppressing bandits in Guangxi, and bandits set up the Yin-Gate formation to resist the official army's cannons.
Guangxu Jiawu Spring, Sichuan Shunqing bandits rebel. At that time, Xu Zinglin was acting as the governor. He suffered from foot disease, so he sent his general Ma Shangfei with troops to pacify the rebellion. One day, the battle was in progress, and suddenly the rebels on the opposite side of the formation launched dozens of women, those women crying, and the official artillery even malfunctioned. Such instances are also recorded in the recent miscellaneous articles of some people, called Married Women Suppressing Artillery. In the book I have read, Liu Hini Ysu Oyan, it is recorded that naked women can restrain the enemy, which is honestly not worthy of a laugh from the general public. This distorted reasoning circulated for long and wide. There are still those who believe in it now. Can be worrying.
During the Tangji revolt of the Qing dynasty, the government army Shuzhen Biao attacked Suzhou, and the Hui Muslim rebels also used the Yin-Gate formation to resist.
Xu Zhenbiao's troops are bombarding the enemy with guns and artillery, and suddenly the artillery malfunctions. Surprised at that time, the enemy had killed 2 women erected in front of the array, which seemed to be a demonic suppression of our side.
By the time of the Boxer Rebellion, not only had the Yin-Gate formation been used repeatedly to break the enemy, but each time it failed, it was also blamed on the adoption of the Yin-Gate formation by Western missionaries or soldiers. In fact, during the riots at the end of the Ming Dynasty, when Zhang Xuanzong's army attacked Quzhou and Li Ziqing's army attacked Bianliang, they all chopped off hundreds of women's heads, exposed their nether regions, and inserted them upside down in the soil. Coincidentally, the city's cannons all happened to malfunction and had problems. In 1792, French newspapers published scenes of French noble women with bare bottoms, and Jacobins holding salami representing the male sex organ, confronting Austrian troops. In the section of this book entitled Born to be Kings, Aim no Yuzumi no Makoto is described as holding a bamboo leaf, standing on an inverted bucket dancing, tearing off her clothes, and exposing her breasts and pubic area, similar to the statue of Kannon, which is enshrined with a naked bottom in the temple of Kanshoji in today's Tatebayashi City, Japan. Both have the connotation of warding off evil spirits. Local men in Tatebayashi City jokingly refer to going to see a striptease as going to see Kannon. In addition to this, similar to the French holding salamis, Chinese history records a Yin-Gate formation that exposed the phallus of a 15-year-old man or a monk. Their men were required not only to bare their lower bodies but usually to shave their body hair. Gao Shu of the Qing dynasty wrote Jinluan Suoji, in which he recorded the deeds of the Boxer Rebellion. He used the principles of the Bagua and Taishai to explain the idea of Yin-Gate formation.
The blind old man, Shiji, said Master Fan used women's menstrual blood to dye his forehead, and the cannon could not be hit. Prime Minister Xu believes it. He passed to Hanlin, and Huangshis in Mechendong Jiang Hanlin said, Dangjiao Mingxiang and West Kosh, the foreigners make women naked around to defend against the guns. Hearing these rumors, everyone laughed. Only Prime Minister Xu believed it. Prime Minister Xu has been preaching Qingyu's theory and is also the Crown Prince's teacher. After retreating from the court, he recruited various Hanlin to speak on the Yin-Gate formation. He said he had heard that Fan had cut off the woman's pussy and made a Yin-Gate formation to protect himself from the guns. Master Fan did not do this kind of thing. There are 3 poems about it. The 8 trigrams are from Taiyin. The screen is made of flesh, and the pubic hair is swaying without knowing the depth. When will Zhuanu pass on the art of war? I want to visit Hanlin Jiang in Qingju.
The Xuanu in the poem is known as Jiudian Xuanu. It is the goddess of war, sex, and longevity in Han mythology, similar to the combination of Aphrodite and Athena in Greek mythology. Zhuanu's sister, Sunu, meaning the immaculate girl, is related to sex and music. Their other sister was the Kanu, meaning the colorful woman. Chuanu, Sunu, and Kanu together taught the Yellow Emperor the theory of sex and practiced all kinds of sex techniques with him, forming the Zhuangzi Dao, various techniques of sex in Han mythology. It was recorded in the Xuanujing and Sunujing by later generations. Legend has it that Sunu invented the Chinese classical instrument, the zither. The combination of Xuanu, Sunu, and Kanu is so similar to an Anna in Sumerian mythology that we have to suspect that many of the legends in Han mythology may have come from the Sumerian mythological system. When Perseus returned to Seriphos, his mother, Danae took refuge in the temple to escape the coercion of King Polydex. The enraged Perseus broke into the king's palace. Surprised to see the returning hero, Polydex could not believe that Perseus had accomplished the task of beheading Medusa. Perseus raised Medusa's head in the face of the king and turned both Polydex and his ministers to stone. Perseus kept his promise and returned the weapon the gods had lent him. Also, to thank Athena for her assistance, he offered Athena the head of Medusa. Athena set Medusa's head on top of her shield. We mentioned earlier that when Zeus was born, to keep him from being eaten by his father, Cronus, his mother, Rhea, wrapped the stone in swaddling clothes and gave it to Cronus to devour, while leaving the real Zeus in the hands of Gaia, who gave Zeus to the nymph Adrastea to raise. Since Cronus ruled the earth, the sky, and the sea, Adrastea hid Zeus in a cave, hanging from a rope from a tree, suspended between the land, the sea, and the sky, so that Zeus could not be found by his father, Cronus. Adrastea fed Zeus with milk and honey from the goat Amalthea. When the goat Amalthea died, Zeus took her skin away. Hephaestus, the god of fire and craftsman, fashioned the goat skin into 2 shields and named Aegis. One of the shields was offered to Zeus. The shield of Zeus was so full of magic that waving it created a storm. The other was given to Athena. The 4 corners of the shield of Athena have the magical powers of fear, battle, ferocity, and tracking. It is now fitted with Medusa's head so that anyone who sees the shield will be turned to stone. According to Freud, the nudity of the female sexual organs has an intimidating effect, which comes from the castrating episodes of human adolescence, and the nudity of the male sex organs has the effect of showing off and scorn. Medusa's serpentine hair has the dual effect of both male sexual organs and femininity, all of which, having been explored in detail earlier in this book, by the section on Girl Insulted and Castrated, and will not be repeated here. In the eyes of modern historians, Medusa was a priestess of the temple of Athena. Her rape and captivity imply the historical fact of the capture of Athens. Perseus sacrificed Medusa's head to Athena, representing the finalized restoration of the nation. Joseph John Campbell was an American professor of literature at Sarah Lawrence College, working on comparative mythology and comparative religion. His work deals with many aspects of human experience. Campbell's most famous work, The Hero with 1,000 Faces, influenced George Walton Lucas Jr. to create the Star Wars series. He had his unique take on the metaphor of the Medusa legend.
The legend of Perseus beheading Medusa means, specifically, that the Hellens overran the goddess's chief shrines and stripped her priestesses of their Gorgon masks, the latter being apotropaic faces worn to frighten away the profane. That is to say, there occurred in the early 13th century BC an actual historic rupture, a sort of sociological trauma, which has been registered in this myth. Much as what Freud terms the latent content of a neurosis is registered in the manifest content of a dream, registered yet hidden, registered in the unconscious yet unknown or misconstrued by the conscious mind.
Perseus killed Polydex. Polydex's brother, Dictys, who had ever taken in Perseus' mother and son, ascended the throne. At this point, Perseus was ready to return to his hometown of Argos with his family, but his mother, Danae, fearing that the oracle predicted that her son would kill her father, informed her son Perseus of the oracle concerning the family. Perseus decides to leave for Larissa instead of Argos, to avoid killing his maternal grandfather, Acrisius. Larissa, meaning fortress, is located in central Greece. In present day, it is the capital and largest city of Thessaly. Perseus' maternal grandfather, Acrisius, had already heard the heroic story of Perseus, and fearing that Perseus would return to his native Argos and fulfill the oracle, he too went out to Larissa and founded the city here. When Perseus came to Larissa, Acrisius was holding games here. Perseus took part in the games, and as he threw the discus, a stone piece that in ancient Greek would have been similar to the discus of today, it struck Acrisius, causing the death of his maternal grandfather. The oracle is the fated end. You try to escape, but the invisible lasso always catches up with you. The grieving Perseus buried his maternal grandfather, and, unable to stay in the land of sorrow, he gave the throne of Argos to Megapence, meaning great sorrow, the son of Proetus. Proetus was the brother of Acrisius, who had seduced his niece, Danae, the mother of Perseus. In exchange, Megapentes transferred the kingdom of Tyrants to Perseus. Perseus founded a new city, Mycenae. The first civilization in Europe was the Minoan civilization, which began around 3100 BC, followed by the Mycenaean civilization, also known as Mycenaean Greece, in the late Bronze Age. The famous Trojan War happened at the end of the Mycenaean civilization, between the Achaeans and the city-state of Troy on the west coast of Asia Minor. The walls of Mycenae were so strong that Homer praised them as mighty walled. The Mycenaean civilization declined in its later years and was finally destroyed by Argos in 468 BC. In 1999, Mycenae was selected as a World Heritage Site by the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization as the main site of the Mycenaean civilization in Greece. It is one of the best preserved monuments on the Greek mainland. Perseus and Andromeda had 7 sons: Perses, Alcaeus, Helios, Mestor, Sthenelus, Electryon, and Cinorus, and 2 daughters, Gorgophone and Atok. Perses remained in Ethiopia and is said to have become the ancestor of the Persians. After Perseus's death, he was elevated to the sky by Zeus to become a constellation in the northern sky, Perseus. Andromeda became the constellation located in the northern celestial hemisphere. Andromeda's mother and father all became the constellation, and the Cetus also became the constellation. In ancient Greek mythology, oracles were declarations of destiny's arrangements. All heroes tried to escape their fate, but the result fell into the oracle. Prometheus also foresaw his destiny, but he did not escape and bravely met his destiny. He created man and helped man to set up the world beyond the world of the gods. Therefore, Prometheus, the forethought god, surpasses his brother, the afterthought man, because he never ran away from his destiny. After the death of Perseus, his son, Electryon, succeeded to the throne. Another son of Perseus, Mestor, meaning counselor, married Lycidas and had a daughter, Hippothou, meaning swift as a mare. Beauty is hard to escape the favor of the dark gods. Poseidon hunted Perseus' offspring again to avenge Perseus' wife-taking. He abducted Hippothou from her family and took her to Echidna to rape her. There, Hippothou gave birth to Taphius. Taphius founded the city of Tarphos there. The locals were known as the Taphians, which means he went far. Taphius gave birth to a son, Teralaus. When he died, the son succeeded to the throne. Poseidon loved this grandson so much that he made a magical golden hair grow on his head. And as long as this hair stayed on his head, he would be immortal and unconquerable. Sadly, a girl's heart must always leave her parents. His daughter Camitho, meaning bright-haired, fell in love with Teralaus's enemy. Camitho pulled out her father's blonde hair, and led to the killing of Tereus. Love's blindness prevents women from recognizing real heroes. To punish her for the treacherous death of her father, Camitho was put to death by the man she loved. Epimetheus makes men short-sighted and women blind in love. Please follow me, share me, and subscribe to my channel so that more people can join us in revealing and changing fates and changeable destinies.
History doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes.
In a cave, a beautiful young pregnant woman is beheaded at a collective wedding site. 49 grooms were brutally murdered. Who is the murderer? Follow me and subscribe to my channel. Today, I'm going on an adventure with you to find the real culprit behind the murder. As we discussed in Girl Insulted and Castrated, we mentioned another version of the Medusa myth in that section, but did not discuss it in depth. According to Freud, seeing Medusa's head become rigid actually implies an erection and firmness of the man's phallus. The version we haven't explored in depth may be the original truth of the Medusa myth. Perseus saw the beautiful Medusa and lusted after her. The myth says that Athena cast a spell to keep Medusa from being invaded by men. Thus Perseus' rape did not succeed. If we strip away the behavior of the goddess Athena, then in his excitement, Perseus was unable to complete the intercourse himself, or Medusa's resistance caused Perseus to fail in his act of rape. In a fit of rage, Perseus killed the beautiful pregnant woman. Even in a mythical age where force was revered, killing a pregnant woman was a really dishonorable act. So Perseus, the sole beneficiary of this brutalizing beauty, would need a story that would change perceptions. Making Medusa a harmful serpent demon was a pleasing plot, but the story wasn't perfect enough. Perseus still needs a plausible excuse. When Perseus and his mother drifted to Seriphos, Dictys took them in. According to the legend, Dictys raised Perseus as his own son. At the end of the legend, Perseus killed Dictys' brother, Litycetes, king of Seriphos. Thus Dictys became the new king and married Danae, the mother of Perseus. In ancient Greece, regicide and usurpation of the throne were likewise anathema, requiring at least exile. Here, Dictys needed an honorable excuse to consolidate his throne, and Perseus needed a perfect story to portray himself as a hero. And Danae becomes the victim in the story, and the real king, Litycetes, becomes the root of all evil in the story. This script of the story recounts the pursuit of Danae by King Litycetes, using violent coercion. This coercion, which lasted from Perseus' first birth until Perseus killed Medusa and married Andromeda and gave birth to his first son, returned to Seriphos. The back and forth is calculated to be 20 years. We know that a man is a teenager until he dies, and his love is always the same forever, just in love with a young and beautiful girl. In ancient times, people aged very quickly. A man could pursue a woman for more than 20 years without getting what he wanted while not using the king's power to force her into submission. This story is either a gross violation of common sense or is to prove that the king was devoted to his love, to prove that Litycetes was a good king who convinced people with his virtues. And it is even more unreasonable that Dictys, who had raised Danae and her son for more than 20 years after his accession to the throne, remained a bachelor and had to wait until he became king before marrying Danae. We can deduce by simple common sense that after Dictys took in the helpless Danae mother and child, he married Danae. Only then did it become logical to raise Perseus as his own. And when Perseus returned, his crimes likely angered King Litycetes. In for a penny, in for a pound, and Perseus, with the help of Dictys, killed King Litycetes. Or it was to help Dictys gain the throne that Perseus staged a palace coup. In order to cover up the usurpation, as is the popular version nowadays, the guilt was put on the old king, Lidicetes. And so it went according to the now dominant narrative of the story, blaming all the evil on old King Lidicetes, which is counterintuitive but at least perfect. After all, most people are nothing more than hunting for novelty and lack the ability to think logically. Perseus and Dictys collude with each other, one becoming the world's unrivaled hero, the other the new king of justice. The perfect version of the story became the dominant narrative handed down today. Another not wonderful version, though lacking in twists and intriguing plots, have passed down nonetheless. As a historical detective who can travel through the ages, you surely understand that any story that is illogical must be false. That is logical may be not true, but at least it is closer to the truth. In a murder case, who benefits and who is suspect? Who benefits the most and who is suspect the most? We can use the same reasoning to analyze the tragic murder of 49 grooms. Danaus agreed to marry his 50 daughters to the 50 sons of his brother Aegyptus. However, on the eve of the wedding night, he told his daughters that the oracle had said that his son-in-law would kill him. Therefore, Danaus asked his daughters to kill the groom on the wedding night. As we explored in The Husband Killers, on her wedding night, the eldest daughter, Hypernestra, asks her husband, Lynceus, to keep her virginity, which she believes will avoid both oracles and bloodshed. But all other 49 of Danaus' daughters killed their husbands while they slept. Lynceus later kills Danaus and becomes the new king of Argos. Analyzing this event in hindsight, Lynceus benefits the most. But wait, Lynceus was alive because of Hypernestra's misconception. Hypernestra believed that as long as they did not have intercourse, Lynceus would not be considered her husband and would be able to avoid the oracle. So, it would seem logical to sit back and wait for the 49 sisters to kill their husbands, making Hypernestra the biggest beneficiary. But wait, why create a wedding night tragedy when one's father is already king of Argos, and one's is the oldest daughter and first in line to become the future queen? Not to mention that Hypernestra was unable to manipulate the other sisters. If assuming that Hypernestra was behind the manipulation, it would be irrelevant whether or not she and the groom had sex. It would seem that King Danaus, who had no male heirs and only 50 daughters, would have been the one to benefit the most. In those days, when a few warriors united to create a city-state, it was his own brother, who came to Argos with 50 sons, who was the greatest threat to his throne. The best way to stop that threat was to have one's daughters take out the brother's offspring with the help of an oracle. So, Danaus was the person who benefited the most from this murder. How Danaus became king of Argos is obscure in the myth. A previous king, Pelasgus, took in Danaus and his 50 daughters. Danaus also brought well-drilling technology to Argos and gained the support of the local people, a story very similar to the one in Han Chinese mythology. Yu the Great, the hero of Han Chinese mythology, who, after 13 years, finally succeeded in ruling the Yellow River. At the same time, he gained widespread popularity and support in his joint water rule efforts with various tribes, eventually forcing Emperor Shun to pass the throne to himself. Thus, the process by which Danaus gained the throne of Argos was probably also violent. So it is also possible the Avenger created the oracle. We can ultimately come to two conclusions about the two biggest beneficiaries in the case of the husband killers. 1. Danaus needed to keep his throne. 2. The Avenger needed Danaus and his brother to be fratricidal. The story has no predictable ending. One person escaped, and that one escapee, Lynceus, his father, was originally the king of Egypt. So Lynceus has the ability to bring some people back to Argos for revenge. Danaus, the biggest beneficiary of the premeditation, failed, and the Avenger got his revenge. So who is the real mastermind behind this fiasco? Danaus or the anonymous Avenger? I'm afraid only you can answer that. Perseus was a descendant of Danaus, who was a descendant of Io. Io, in turn, was the daughter of Inachus. Inachus was the earliest king of Argos. Upon his death, he divided the land between his two sons, Phegeus and Phoronius. And Phoronius became the second king of Argos. His name means bringer of a price, and he was considered a culture hero of the Argolid, fire bringer, and lawgiver. When Io was taken captive, Inachus sent many people to search for his daughter. Lurcus, son of Phoronius, was one of the searches. He traveled over the vast land and sea without finding Io. As Lurcus was too afraid of his grandfather Inachus, he dared not return to Argos and went to Canos. He married Hellebia, daughter of Aegelus, king of Paphlagonia. Paphlagonia belonged to present-day Turkey and was a city on the Black Sea coast in north-central Anatolia. King Aegelus gave Lurcus land and great treasure. After many years of happiness, Lurcus and Hellebia had no offspring. So Lurcus traveled to the temple of Apollo in the holy land of Didyma to ask for an oracle. The oracle informs Lurcus that he will give birth to a son with the first woman he meets after leaving the temple. So Lurcus happily set out on his journey home. When Lurcus arrived at Bybastus, a city in Caria, Staphylos entertained him. Staphylos' name means grape cluster in Greek. He was the son of Dionysus and Ariadne. Ariadne was the daughter of Minos, king of Crete. We will discuss later about the story that Ariadne helped Theseus kill the Minotaur. Lurcus revealed the contents of the oracle to Staphylos. Staphylos then entertained Lycos, inducing him to drink a lot of wine. He then arranged for his daughter Hemithea to sleep with him. In fact, there was a bitter quarrel between the two daughters of Staphylos, Rhoio and Hemithea, over Lurcus. So it is possible that both daughters slept next to Lycos, but the drunken Lurcus slept with only one of them. The next morning, when Lurcus sees the beauty beside him, God knows whether he's truly happy or falsely angry. After all, you've seen too many drunken escapades, but never a drunken scolding of the boss in front of the boss. Lurcus strongly reprimands Staphylos for condoning his daughter's behavior. But knowing what the oracle had said, that this woman would bring him offspring, he unclasped his belt and gave it to Hemithea, Staphylos' daughter, instructing her to keep it safe until their offspring grew up and came to him with a token. Later in the story, Rhoio and Hemithea fall asleep while in charge of watching after their father's wine. When they woke up, the sisters found that the wine jar had been broken by the family's swine. Fearing their father's chastisement, the two sisters jumped off a cliff with Apollo's name under their breath. Apollo falls in love with Rhoio and grants them eternal life. Rhoio became Apollo's lover and was pregnant. When her father, Staphylos, found out she was pregnant, he believed she was impregnated by a man rather than a god. So Staphylos put her in a chest and cast her out to sea. Rhoio drifted to the island of Delos, a holy place of the sun god. She gave birth to her son Aeneas on the island, a name meaning suffering. Rhoio put the child on Apollo's altar and prayed to save him if the child was his. Apollo hid the child for a time, raised him, and taught him the arts of divination and prophecy. Rhoio later married Xerxes. Aeneas later became a priest of Apollo and king of Delos. In 1992, The Roots of the Imperial City, co-authored by Chinese authors Jiang Gongchen and Danian Zhao, was published. In the novel, Jiang Kuani and his wife Jingxiu are married and also fail to conceive for a long time. Once, Jiang Kuani traveled to find someone who could tell fortunes, and said that in some place where he could find an abandoned baby. Jiang Kuani went to that location and really picked up a baby boy. So he and his wife adopted the baby. After many years, Jingxiu realized the truth, that this abandoned baby is Jiang Kuani and singer Chen Yang's illegitimate child. This fortune-telling is also similar to oracles. So oracles, if you believe in them, may also have very good stories. But Lurcus' father-in-law, King Aegelus, was too sophisticated to be fooled by this oracle. He drove the love rat out of his kingdom. Lurcus then organized his troops to go to war with his father-in-law. His wife, Helibia, believed in the oracle and sided with her husband. Years later, Basileus, the illegitimate son of Lurcus and Hemifia, grew up and came to Caunus. Time is always on the side of the young. Lurcus grew old, and his father-in-law died of old age. Basileus gained a kingdom and began to rule the people. Substitution is an important way of human perception. When observing historical events, one can be vicarious, perceiving them from a real perspective and being there in person. One can penetrate more fog and realize the truth firsthand. Benedetto Croce was an Italian philosopher, historian, and politician. He made epoch-making and important points about the study of history. He pointed out that historical events are mere chronicles, not historiography. True historiography requires one to have a notion of personal experience and to penetrate into the historical events themselves in order to get to the heart of history. In particular, Croce emphasized that, unlike science, historiography does not use general rules to understand specific phenomena, but that true knowledge can only be gained through insight into specific facts.
And it will be impossible ever to understand anything of the effective process of historical thought unless we start from the principle that the spirit itself is history, maker of history at every moment of its existence, and also the result of all anterior history. Thus the spirit bears with it all its history, which coincides with itself.
Today, when we revisit myths and legends, it is equally important that we have a trans-historical, in-person, great detective's perspective. In this chapter of Ideas and Myths, written in the stars' predestined fate, we also recount the Yin-Gate formation. This method of frightening off enemies by exposing a man's or woman's sexual organs, which existed in both the East and the West, is just one more proof that humans are the same all over the world, and human beings all have the same human nature. Similarly, in this chapter, in the section on the birth of tragedy, we have analyzed the custom of cooking the first son, which exists in all parts of the world. This also shows that all civilizations have their origins in barbarism. It is only that some civilizations have gone one step ahead and found a code to bring humanity into cooperation and through cooperation to prosperity. This code is so clear and open, yet it still does not allow some civilizations to consciously come out of barbarism, and they are still wandering in barbarism. From this point of view, what binds life is not really fate, but concepts. Giovanni Battista Vico, known as Giambattista Vico, was an Italian political philosopher, orator, historian, and jurist. In his book, The New Science, he adopted the ancient Egyptian concept of dividing human history into three ages: the age of the gods, the age of the heroes, and the age of human. The age of the gods. People believed they lived under the rule of a divine regime, making decisions through omens and oracles. The age of heroes. The age of aristocratic rule. In fact, the first generation of regime builders became the rightful rulers by molding superior characteristics over the commoners through the myth of bloodline bonding with the gods. The age of human. Realizing the equality of human nature, people established a human, or democratic, form of government, and later a monarchical form of government, both of which were different forms of humane regimes. Corresponding to the 3 years, Vico suggests that the belief in God, the preservation of the parental family, and the instinct to bury the dead led to the development of the 3 institutions of religion: God, the family, marriage, and the tomb, burial, respectively. Vico further elaborates that these 3 institutions are the 3 main roots of the divisions of the divine, heroic, and human eras, as well as the three main roots of the canon of all human artifacts. From these also come three kinds of punishment: shame, curiosity, and the need for labor. Vico has a famous aphorism:
History should be written by philosophers.
So Ideas and Myths is not one of those books of myths that are already a dime a dozen, but rather a book that, traveling through time and space, is a journey of discovery, acquiring ideas with ideas, and interpreting ideas with ideas.
Who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past.
George Orwell, real name Eric Arthur Blair, was an English novelist, essayist, journalist, and critic. The year he was born, the Wright brothers in the United States made the first controlled, sustained flight of an engine-powered, heavier-than-air aircraft with the Wright Flyer on December 17, 1903. In the year of Orwell's death, the Korean War broke out. Orwell himself was a socialist, but through his two anti-utopian novels, he illustrated how concepts became the ideological foundation that enslaved mankind, and how they became the driving force behind man's quest for freedom. Please follow me, share me, and subscribe to my channel. Together, we continue to explore life's destiny in concepts and myths.
We cannot see our future. We can only determine our ideas, and ideas determine the future we see.